All right, we are ready to begin.
Welcome to the forum for candidates running for alderman of wards 2 and 5 in Evanston. This forum is being sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Evanston and the Evanston Public Library. My name is Mary Kelly, and I am Vice President of the Evanston League. The League of Women Voters is a national, nonpartisan political organization dedicated to promoting the active and informed participation of citizens in government. The League takes positions on issues, but neither endorses nor opposes candidates for public office. This forum is being recorded and will be available on demand on YouTube with links to the video on our League website. In addition to questions from League members and community partners, the public was invited to submit questions for this forum. The deadline for questions was 48 hours prior to the event. The League has reviewed the questions for appropriateness for the office to ensure that questions are directed to all candidates and to eliminate duplication. All candidates for Ward 2 and 5 were invited to this forum and formally accepted the date and time for the event. Unfortunately, candidate Braithwaite's schedule has changed and he is not available to participate in this event. The League of Women Voters of Evanston's ground rules state that the forum must include at least 2 candidates for that office. The League will not hold a scheduled forum when only one candidate for an office accepts or appears for an event. Even though this is a combined forum with another ward, the rule stands for each contested race. If more than one candidate agrees to participate but only one attends, the candidate present is allowed to make a presentation of no longer than 5 minutes. Candidate Cannon has accepted this offer and will give a presentation up to 5 minutes. Following, candidate Cannon will leave the forum. Then we will begin the forum for Ward 5, which will run for about 60 minutes. The moderator for today's forum is Josie Yanguis. She is a resident of Little Village community in Chicago, a member of the League of Women Voters of Chicago, and a member of that league's education committee. She has helped to organize 2 Aldermanic candidate forums in Chicago in cooperation with other community organizations. And now, Josie, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mary. Welcome, candidates. So before I do a summary of the rules, given that it'll primarily affect the discussion for Ward 5, I'll hand it over to candidate Cannon for your 5-minute presentation as a Ward 2 candidate. So please take it away, candidate Cannon.
Okay, thank you. You can hear me correctly?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So thank you to the League of Women Voters and Evanston Public Library for hosting the candidate forums. A little bit about me. I am born and raised in Evanston. I'm the 3rd generation of my family who's lived in Evanston. My parents, they came here during the Great Migration, seeking a better life for themselves. And, that desire, lives in me and it lives in my child and my nephews. I am running because I think we need a progressive, bold leadership in the 2nd ward. Someone who's going to lead and prioritize the residents in the ward. In particular, how we look at how we fund our police And, we say that we're an equitable community. We believe in equity, but it doesn't show in our budget. And it doesn't show in how we don't prioritize adequate housing. In particular, we definitely prioritize housing for 1 bedrooms and micro units, and not for families. In particular, single mothers cannot raise a family in micro units. So, I mean, some of that's, those are some of my priorities for my campaign. I think that we need to lead with co-governing with the residents, and we need to listen to what the residents of the community are saying as far as what they need. And we need to have them sitting at the table when those decisions are made in which we're passing tax increases or other things that might impact them. So again, I'm not going to take up more of your time, but thank you very much for at least allowing me this opportunity. Good luck, you guys.
Thank you very much, Candidate Cannon. Good luck. And let me now give a quick summary regarding the rules for this next section of this candidate forum. All the statements and responses by candidates will be timed, and you should all be able to see this little countdown box timer on here on the screen. One of my responsibilities as moderators is to make sure to enforce the time limits. And so I'm warning everybody that I may interrupt people as we hit the stop section, since these are part of the ground rules that people agreed to. For opening statements, I am going to be calling upon candidates in alphabetical order, and we'll for opening statements, and then we'll be toggling back and forth with the questions, so that no one individual has the questions first. And then finally, for closing statements, it'll be in reverse alphabetical order. And again, all statements and responses are going to be 90 seconds in length. And finally, no visual aids are permitted. So with that, we'll get started with an opening statement from candidate Burns. You have 90 seconds for your opening statement, and please include your qualifications for this aldermanic position. Candidate Burns.
Yes, thank you. My name is Bobby Burns, candidate for 5th Ward Alderman. I have been inspired not just to run, but to get involved in the community from my mother, who served both as a board member on District 202, as well as she worked 18 years at CETA, a social service agency headquartered in the 5th Ward. I followed in her footsteps, and in 2009, I organized a march around Evanston Township High School to bring our seniors and young folks together to strategize about ways to reduce violence. More recently, we organized a march for Jacob Blake in solidarity with his family. And in between that time, I've served as deputy city clerk. I've served on the board of Open Communities, a HUD certified housing counselor, as well as a private enforcer of fair housing laws. I've organized and led and educated people about 20 separate issues, both that are important to residents here in the 5th Ward, as well as issues that have been discussed on council. And I am equipped with a professional experience of political consulting, where we work to elect good, honest leaders to all levels of local government, as well as work on advancing policy issues across the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your opening statement, candidate Murray.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Murray. I'm the 5th Ward Aldermanic candidate. Thank you so much, Women League, for this forum today. I will start off by telling you that I was born and raised in the 5th Ward at Community Hospital, the only Black hospital at the time to have Black patients. I've been active in the ward. I've been a Navy veteran. I actually purchased my home after the 9/11 deployment, coming back to Evanston with my 3 children. I've been actively involved in the ward and hosted the ward meeting for over 10 years. One of the first initiatives that I worked on in Evanston, just from going to public comments over 20 years ago, which led the then Alderman, Lionel Jean-Baptiste, to invite me to a group called the Evanston Youth Initiative, which led to the Youth and Young Adult Division as we know it. That has been monumental for creating jobs in the summer program throughout the years here in Evanston, as well as my work with gun buyback for the last 8 years. We've collected over 300 guns off the streets of Evanston. I hosted the ward meetings for over 10 years, active in the ward as a go-to person. Not a week goes by or a day goes by that I don't have one of my neighbors come in and talk.
Thank you very much, Candidate Murray. All right, so now we're going to be moving to the first question, and we will start with Candidate Murray with this first question.
Sure.
In light of the shooting that took place yesterday in Evanston, what short-term and long-term actions would you support to prevent this kind of violence in the future?
Well, I think that I have extensive experience with relating to gun violence as it pertains to Evanston because of my son's murder back in 2012, when I then was working on a gun buyback prior to my son being killed. Part of the reason why is because I heard the gunshots outside my window. I'm former military, and some of my shipmates in Iraq did not get as much gunshots in Iraq that I was experiencing outside my window. I then collectively formed the first gun buyback as I was planning the gun buyback with the involvement of my son and other youth in the city of Evanston. My son was killed just returning home from San Diego. He was killed about 1-2 blocks away from me, but adjacent to the alley of the most recent homicide. I've said then that we need to strategically plan to have an active gun prevention and prevention for crime moving forward. I've worked with 3 of the former police chiefs, and they are more than welcome to invite a serious collective community-based response to gun violence.
Thank you very much. Candidate Burns, same question.
Yes, early on in my organizing in the 5th Ward, we organized to provide programming for youth and young adults who are no longer thriving in existing structured programming in the 5th Ward. This is an ongoing issue, and we need to address it. I think 3 key ways. One, when a conflict escalates to the point where someone is using a firearm on another, the best course of action is violence interruption, conflict mediation, having trained people work both ends to see if we can address the situation. I think the second thing that we need to do is, and I talked to Lakeisha Barton, who's a youth and young adult outreach worker for the city, who said, look, we need some type of getaway for our young men and women who are open to going somewhere where they can find community, where they can find mentorship, where they can find structure, discipline, and opportunities that they may not be able to find here in the 5th Ward. And we need to identify ways to fund it. And then the last thing, let's be frank, we need jobs in the community. There is nothing more important than housing stability and employment stability. When you have those 2 things in your life, you're much more likely to be able to reach your full potential. And so we need to, there's a lot of different opportunities in the ward to create more jobs, pathways to careers, so people can live good, strong, a middle-class life here in Evanston.
Thank you very much. All right. This next question is for you, candidate. We'll start with you, Candidate Burns. How would you balance the calls for defunding the police department with providing safety for Evanston residents and neighborhoods?
Everything we do in the city of Evanston, we should understand that we're using hard-earned tax money to do it. And so everything should be metric driven. We need to have a discussion about what our public safety goals are. And we need to look at all of our practices and policies to determine whether or not we're meeting those goals. I think we've all come to a point as a community where we realize that there are calls that we send police officers to currently that they may not be or are not equipped to handle, and that social workers and other public service providers in our community would be a better equipped to handle. So we need to look at what our goals are. How can we balance needing to address kind of violent incidents? How do we need to balance providing mental health and other services in community, and figure out what are the different services and service providers that are better equipped to handle that work. And we need to look from the top to bottom of all of our practices in our police department, and everything should be measured based on outcomes.
Thank you very much. Candidate Murray, same question.
Can you just repeat the question? I heard it, but I just want to make sure.
Absolutely, would be happy to. How would you balance the calls for defunding the police department with providing safety for Evanston residents and neighborhoods?
Well, I'm definitely interested in looking at the input from an independent review board and taking some of their pointers, as well as talking and engaging with the community. As I move forward, if elected, I will add an additional meeting to our monthly communication with the residents for the police to actively get input and get that exchange of communication going between the residents and our law enforcement leadership. Because of the defunding, I think that reallocating resources to what was lost by a depleted police budget previously is going to be key and monumental as we restructure what type of services that we lost in the previous budgets and how we can acclimate those same services. The services that I'm talking about, the juvenile division. We're looking at the assistance with victims and witnesses. We want to reestablish those type of services and then add additional resources for the mental health experiences that we've been seeing all over the nation. And if that is something that we could explore outside of the police, I'm open to doing that, because I believe that the police response comes off as very negative and aggressive. And I want to change that dialogue, but I want to make sure that the community has that involvement and the independent review board be just as
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. This next question will be for candidate Murray. In order to balance the Evanston budget, what additional sources of revenue would you support?
Well, I think number one, we should really do an extensive look at our existing expenditures. I think that we have to find ways to cut or trim any of the line items in that budget that we have not been able to do previously. I think that the budget that we have seems to be very complicated for the average citizen to understand. So we would have to look at doing something that would make it collectively and responsive and user-friendly, so we can look to ways to cut the fat or any opportunities that we can, looking into federal and state government to also build or include grant monies and additional fundings that we haven't explored before. Our post-COVID numbers aren't in as it pertains to our budget. And that's going to be a serious taxi on us. And I don't want to see the property tax go up. So I think if we are collectively looking at ways to trim those things and aggressively trying to find any type of federal or state guidelines that would bring us the additional monies that would be available. Hopefully we'll get some good federal assistance with our current president, but I'm looking forward to working on something that would not allow us to have a property increase on our taxes that we just saw before.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Burns, same question.
We need to enter into a pilot agreement, a payment in lieu of taxes agreement with any nonprofit in the community that, let's say, it has property valued over $15 million. The federal government requires itself to enter into these agreements with local municipalities when federal lands impede on the local area's ability to get tax, to get enough property tax from that land. And unfortunately, the federal government has not provided guidelines as well as directed us on how to compute payments for pilot agreements between local municipalities and nonprofits. I would request that our federal government take action on that. But in the meantime, we need to enter into one of these agreements with, again, every nonprofit in the community that has property valued over a certain threshold. And we need to do zero-based budgeting. We need to really ask a simple question, which is, why are we spending whatever tax dollars, and are we achieving the goal that we set out to achieve? And while we're doing that, we need to make sure that we're not only measuring value based on costs, but we're also looking at programs' usefulness to the community. We went through a priority-based budgeting process a few years ago, where programs like the Youth and Young Adult Development Department were on the chopping block, and we need to be careful that we're not cutting those programs. But we do need to measure. Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right. Next question will be for you, candidate Burns. Some residents are criticizing the Reparations Committee decision to start with providing housing assistance to some Evanston residents. Do you agree with the criticisms? And if so, what specific reparations would you support?
The response to this is a long one, so I'll just make it clear where I stand. I believe that we need to make sure that we provide direct cash benefits for those who prefer it. We need to make sure that we have a commission that allows people that were directly injured or harmed to determine how funds are allocated. We need to make sure that that we have a participatory budgeting process that allows for that same community to direct funds. We need to make sure that we identify new sources of revenue. Currently, the reparations program is being funded by one source of revenue and maybe some organizational support and individual support, but we need to find other ways where the city can support the program as well as other ways to fund it. And we need to just do a better job of educating the community about the program and the details around it. But in general, we need to bring more people into this conversation.
Thank you very much. Candidate Murray, same question.
So I will say that my reference point started when it was first introduced over a year ago into council. I stated then that I was able to purchase my home off the first-time buyer program that was offered for several years prior to this housing component coming about through reparations. But through the years, that same program was taken away. So to reintroduce it now as a reparations option, I think is just a blatant smack in the face to the ancestry that we have here in the Fifth Ward, as well as those people who could be in the hundreds of thousands and by number that would be eligible to receive this type of compensation. So to marginalize it to only 14 is just very disrespectful. I think that over 100 suggestions were made. I remember some of the residents walking into that same meeting saying that the city was going to give them cash. I believe when you have this type of initiative and you don't get the full involvement and you're not reflecting, because there's been several meetings and those same said citizens were in all of those meetings expressing that interest and desire of being represented and even being a part of the movement of this plan. I believe that there's ways that you should handle it, but it's not being done that way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next question will be for you, candidate Murray. What specific steps do you think Evanston will need to take to be responsive to both landlords and tenants' needs to recover from the pandemic?
Well, there are smaller landlords that are in the Fifth Ward that are financially not doing well because of the support to the tenants that we have. I believe, again, that we need to look into our federal and state funded that will assist with the landlords and any type of opportunities. I get a lot of conversation from small businesses as well as the landlords to the communication that is assisting through it grants or loans that are available to those said individuals. So are we collectively making sure that the landlords are aware of any type of subsidies that we have available? We have a lot of nonprofit organizations in the community as well. We have exacerbated our general assistance fund. So now that St. Vincent de Paul is pretty much giving most of the resources financially to the landlords, as well as paying utility bills for our Fifth Ward residents, we have to include them in the conversation as well. So these landlords are exacerbated with the overcost and the financial hardship that they're experiencing with their tenants. We have to collectively have those conversations, and we have to start bridging the gap with the disconnect with the financial hardship, as well as securing that our landlords will still want to remain with their property and keep tenants in Evanston. We had 25%.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Same question, candidate Burns.
Yeah, I mean, we know we talk about a gap in education. We talk about a gap in income. We don't talk a lot about a gap in information. And part of the reason why my fiance and I started the Informed Village backed by Google is to make sure that we can get information out to hard to reach residents, both landlords, some who may live in Evanston, others who don't, and also our tenants. I think Open Communities, which I was on the board of, is also a good resource for landlords and tenants to get information. But we have to figure out how to close that information gap to make sure that our landlords and our tenants are aware of the financial programs that can support them early on, not once the application process starts, but at the very beginning of it. And you know, I also think we need to make sure that we connect our tenants with rental assistance programs. We have one being administered currently by Connections for the Homeless, as well as the city of Evanston provides a rental assistance program for residents who are under 80% AMI, pay up to 6 months rent. So this is an information gap, both through my door-to-door activity as an alderman, but also through the newspaper that we launched. We're going to get this information out to residents who need it as quick as we can, so that they can take advantage of all the different opportunities and resources.
All right, thank you very much. This next question is for you, candidate Burns. Please explain whether you support the creation of a proposed tax increment financing TIF program in part of the Fifth Ward. What impact will a new TIF in one ward have on other areas of Evanston?
They're still currently doing the feasibility study for the TIF, so I want to wait to provide further analysis once we get that feasibility study back. But as I said in a previous forum, TIF is one of the few opportunities for us to get a lot of investment into communities. The Fifth Ward, of course, has been historically overlooked and disadvantaged and disinvested, and we have to find ways to in the same way we were able to find $50 million to support building a new Robert Crown. We need that same support and investment in the ward, both for infrastructure improvements, to support our built environment, to make investments in family focused Fleetwood, to make sure that we can prioritize the ward for lead pipe replacement. So it's one mechanism, not the only one, but it's one mechanism we currently have to direct a lot of needed funds in a ward that has been historically overlooked. But again, I want to wait until the feasibility study is complete to provide further analysis.
Thank you. Same question, candidate Murray.
Thank you. So as we know that we've had a deficit that greatly exacerbated our budget to the point where there was a proposal of the property tax increase. Well, with this TIF, we know that the District 65 has also announced that they have a deficit. This TIF would take away any additional revenues that would go into District 65, which would put us at another disadvantage in our budget going into a post-COVID phase. At this time, a TIF would not be the most ideal situation because we're already at a deficit and District 65 is at a deficit. TIF funds go directly into the amount that is distributed to District 65. So that would make like a double down on our city budget. I'm not in favor of it moving forward. However, it was already passed, so that it will be an addition that we have to deal with once we start looking at the upcoming budget. It's not creating a helpful situation, it's more of a hardship. So we would have to really kind of scale down and readjust numbers and line items on an already exacerbated post-COVID budget.
All right, thank you very much. All right, the next question is for you, Candidate Murray. What are the most important steps that council should take to advance the goals of the Climate Action and Resiliency Plan?
Well, some of the proposals that we see right now are involving our recycling in our education. I believe strongly that we should look into how to make the residents become more aware of the opportunities and our goals, our long-term goals for making Evanston much greener. I remember working the ward meetings when we would introduce the first little bins for the recycling and how it was educational for the citizens to actually learn and be so much a part of a bigger solution. I think that no one wants to not have a clean environment for their children's children, but some of our more senior residents in the community have kind of like a hard time with changing with the new times. But with education, I've seen those attitudes and those assumptions kind of change because you're feeling like you're a part of it. So I propose that we get the churches involved as well as the city educators to do that in meetings that we have with the ward on a regular basis, and to get the benefits of what it would look like if we were much greener in Evanston. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Same question, Candidate Burns.
Yeah, first and foremost, I always tell residents that whether you're an environmentalist or not, there's nothing more important than the water you drink or bathe with, the air you breathe, and the environment that you're in every day. Of course, in the 5th Ward, we have at least 2 or 3 sites that are concerns for air pollution. We have a high-powered transmission lines that are concerned for radiation exposure. We have water that hasn't been adequately checked for lead. And so we have issues we need to address. I think we need to, I'm committed to sitting on the environment board as an alderman. Currently, we do not, I believe, have an alderman that sits on the environment board. In addition to that, if we have enough council support, I think we should make it a standing committee so that we make sure we can take much needed action on our climate action and resiliency implementation. I think we need to pass an omnibus ordinance that groups together all the different recommendations for CARP, so it's easier for our legal department to draft the ordinances, and it also makes it a lot easier for residents to track the issues that they care most about. Of course, education, educating the community, and making sure that we're tying workforce development into this. We understand that at some point, the city of Evanston is going to change our building and energy codes that require deep retrofitting of our homes. And we need to make sure that we have contractors and people working, doing the home improvements that are from here in Evanston so that we can create those much needed jobs.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, next question for you, Candidate Burns. Evanston has used the council/city manager form of government since 1952, but the state allows for other types of government. What form of government do you think is most appropriate for Evanston, and what are your reasons?
To be clear, any change in the form of government will require a referendum. It will require a majority of voters in Evanston voting to do it. So as an alderman, I am, as I said before, I'm open to both. Now, my concern is that as a political consultant, I'm looking at what's happening around our county. And what I've seen in places like Calumet, who have a strong form of mayor government, is that law firms in particular get really involved in elections. They put a lot of money behind the mayoral candidate of their choice in trying to get a shoe-in on future contracts, because in a strong mayor form of government, the mayor has the ability to retain outside legal counsel. So my only caution is if the community at large decides to pass a referendum that changes our form of government, that we should also include campaign finance reform to make sure that people that don't have access to big donors and aren't independently wealthy still have a shot at running and winning both the mayoral campaign, but also campaigns for aldermen.
Thank you very much. Same question, candidate Murray.
Well, I believe with our last mayoral election, prior to this most recent mayoral election, we've seen an exuberant amount of money being put into mayoral campaigns. And I think that the overall result was that there was a candidate with less than a quarter of the amount get that much close and be just as viable as a candidate. So I would agree with any form of government that a referendum would allow if those changes are appropriate. I believe that part of the reason why you have so many candidates in the running right now in the current election is because that the people have been outpouring with their lack of being heard and their concerns and issues being addressed, with management positions being selected by a council that has been completely disconnected or cut off from the residents. Overwhelming, we hear in public comments, responses, if you have 1 minute or 3 minutes, that are not even responded to or addressed in an official city capacity. So to have a mayor that could possibly be more inundated with responsibilities than the current existing mayor, we're open to it, because at least that way we know that unbiasedly we'll move forward and we won't see an overhaul of a city manager that was not a part of the choice of the residents in our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, candidate Murray. This next question is for you, candidate Murray. Should racial equity training for all city staff be pursued, and why? What outcomes would be achieved?
I believe the standard training when it pertains to racial equity, as well as sexual orientation and harassment and those things, are common practices for most corporations and businesses moving forward. We've seen a lot of, I would say softly, council people be just as racially insensitive under the ethics violations and codes. So of course I would be in favor for any type of training and any type of supplementing information ongoing on a regular basis for staff as well as council people moving forward.
All right, thank you very much. Candidate Burns, same question.
Training, yes, but in addition, we need to really think about how we want to use our partnership with GARE, the Government Alliance on Racial Equity. We need help identifying current inequities and harms that are being perpetuated in the community. And I believe if we better establish a relationship with GARE, we could do that work. I think we need equity coaches as well. We need people who can help our department heads implement an equity goal as they're doing a particular assignment, as opposed to those two things being instead of those two things being so separate from one another and disconnected. We need to bring in coaches who can help our department heads facilitate an equity kind of goal as they're doing a particular task. And we need to get a better sense of how we want to use our equity commission, our equity commissioner. We can't forget that we've already taken action in creating those two things in order to further our equity goals. And so we have to get a better sense of how we would like to use them.
All right, thank you very much, candidate Burns. This next question will be for you, candidate Burns. As the community recovers from the pandemic, what role do you think the arts should play, and how would you suggest that the city support the arts?
I could answer the second part of that. So one, from what I've heard from the community is that art programs, we need to make art programs more affordable. We need to support local artists, especially with funds from the Art Council, to make sure we're supporting smaller, local, more grassroots and neighborhood art programs and artists. I was talking to Piloto, who's an artist that behind the You Are Brilliant mural on Foster between Jackson and Ashland. And he is soon to be a new Art Council committeeman, and he's really excited about both working to provide affordable arts programs in the community, but also he has a really creative idea to create jobs through the arts that I think we need to explore. I'll leave it at that. Yeah, I have an answer for that second part, not necessarily the first one. Thanks for the question.
All right, well, thank you very much. Candidate Murray, same question.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again, please?
Absolutely, be happy to. As the community recovers from the pandemic, what role do you think the arts should play? And how would you suggest that the city support the arts?
Well, I can definitely attest to following the CDC guidelines and making sure that once theaters and public settings and any art or live theater comes back into the city, that we're following strict guidelines to make sure that there's no liability in any of the facilities. But I would love to see some enhancement of bringing the arts back into the Fifth Ward. I know that we were collectively doing some of the things at Fleetwood, but with the current things that we got going on with the COVID phase, we're not really seeing that. So I'm hoping that once it does get back, that we're not overlooked and bypassed in the Fifth Ward for any opportunities. I would like to also explore any opportunities of looking into initiatives for the youth and the young adults that we have throughout the city in the Fifth Ward, especially some things at Gibb Morris. I know that the recording studio is still set up there, so I would love to explore any options that the young people that would have, since Evanston Township is back on a daily basis, we would at least invite them over to look at any type of exploratory classroom settings or facilities that they can use at the Gibbs Morris, or possibly even looking into Fleetwood again. We promised the youth something for them to do, more activities, but we never really delivered on that promise. And I've seen that for over 10 years now. I would hope that we could definitely get the youth into our arts and our visual performances.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this next question will be for you, Candidate Murray. What issues specific or unique to your ward need to be addressed by council? And how will you explain these issues to other aldermen to gain their support?
Well, I would definitely say, in light of everything that has happened, the safety. But I've been advocating for safety since 2012 to be an invited representative from Evanston and the Washington, D.C., working with former President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle. I believe that our gun safety or prevention of gun violence in our neighborhood is very crucial. No one should have to die. We average one homicide every year, and it's just completely unacceptable. And to not take on an initiative that would secure that every person feels safe in their neighborhood is just, it's past due. And it's disrespectful to the ward. It's disrespectful to Black people to not have that at the forefront. The parents, the teachers, the whole community responds when they don't feel safe. It is not normal to hear gunshots outside of your house. It is not normal to lose a neighbor at least once every year. And I will never be comfortable. I will never not want to push for a gun buyback, gun awareness, community block clubs, just getting the information out that we will not tolerate any type of violence in our neighborhood, that we are collectively working against and creating safe environments for our children.
Thank you very much. Candidate Burns, same question.
Yeah, as I said before, bringing in violence interrupters, trained conflict mediators to mediate ongoing conflicts. Affordability. We have houses in the ward that are going for $400,000 and $600,000. Folks can't afford that, right? So we need to find both affordable houses to purchase, but also better determine what people can pay and what they're willing to pay to live in Evanston, to determine the type of rental market that we need in the community, as well as we may need to provide better opportunities for townhomes and purchasing condos. Youth enrichment programs. We need more things for our young people to do and more opportunities for them that are closer to where they live in safe walking distance. We need to widen the path to home ownership and make sure that when property is available, that it isn't always going to out of town absentee landlords, but that people who intend to live in the dwellings have subsidies or whatever they need to live there. Clean air and clean water is a big thing. I talked earlier about the inadequate testing of lead in the water, as well as the sites of concern for air pollution in the ward. And jobs. It's not by mistake that this was one of the strongest communities in terms of home ownership. It was that way because we had a big industry and manufacturing presence that created jobs, and we can't bring those jobs back, but there's other new green energy jobs, as well as other jobs that we can have to employ people in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, this next question will be for you, candidate Burns. Do you think the Civic Center should be sold? If not, what funds would support its maintenance? If so, how should the resulting funds be invested in city programs?
I'm hearing both sides at this point. I talked to a developer in the ward who said, no way, don't sell it. One, he said it's not a seller's market. Two, why don't we rent out the rooms as we're already doing? I believe there's some politicians who have offices and who have an office in the city civic center. We have Evanston Development Cooperative, which is a community-owned co-op that has an office. Why not rent the offices out? And if we ever need to expand, we have more space to grow into. And then, of course, I've heard the other end where people say, there's a way that we can get revenue from it. There's a way that we can kind of relocate the 300 employees that are in there every day downtown and use their commerce as a way to boost our economy downtown. I'm hearing both sides of the discussion. Always, I err on the side of keeping our public assets, but we need to. I'm still listening to both sides. And of course, this is going to be a community-wide, robust conversation. The Civic Center provides great access to city services, great parking. I would have to see some really good, strong evidence to suggest that we need to sell it, but I'm still weighing both sides.
Thank you very much. Candidate Murray.
Thank you. So with that proposal, I would like to seriously have some financials to back exactly how much would it cost to really completely rehab that building to make it structurally sound and going in the cleaner green direction. Just some serious numbers, exactly how much it would be. And obviously, of course, we would have to assess if it's even worth even venturing into that, or because the building is that old, to possibly sell it off and deviate from that. I've seen that because of COVID, we're fully functional to not be in those spaces. So to consider having site locations for city services, I would definitely be in favor for that, because we've been able to maintain it. So it's not that it would be a deficit if we weren't physically in that building. But I err on the side of caution as to what would be the most cost-effective way moving forward. So we would definitely have to do some thorough research and the financials to back the actual decision. And of course, we would obviously have to have those conversations with the residents as well, because we want to make sure that they're included and they're well informed every step of the way. The property, if it goes up, I would not be in favor for it to just completely be sold with not having some type of affordable housing component attached to the.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. This is the last question before closing statements, and this will be directed first to candidate Murray. City Council appoints the Foia officer or officers. What is your recommendation on how this role should be structured? And who should be responsible for responding to Foia requests, to Freedom of Information Access requests?
I believe it should have been still with the traditional setup that we had before under the clerk's jurisdiction, because I believe that the clerk is an independent body that is elected, so they can duly handle those responsibilities. Obviously, we have a legal team, and we have a legal team for a reason. However, to just override that and the spinoff as to what we're seeing now and the lack of FOIA responses is disrespectful to our citizens. To put in a request and have such a backlog that we see right now and have this interweb conflict, and the people that our residents putting in for FOIA requests and not getting them honored, that's not good local business. That's not good local government. We should be diligently trying to get those answers and get those FOIAs done. And if we have to revert back to what we had before and have them done according to the state statute, then that's what we should be doing.
All right, thank you very much. Candidate Burns, your turn.
Yes, as deputy city clerk, one of my roles was to administer FOIA, and I want to be clear with residents. It is your right to access public records, and under the clerk's office, and let's be clear, FOIA has always in this city for at least a while now has been under the clerk's office, and you have a right to those records. And I think it makes sense to have an elected independent office, no matter who the clerk is, that has some autonomy to make sure that we're not closing out requests before the city clerk is allowed to look at it, and make sure that the records are either being released or denied for good cause. And, I want to also be clear that the relationship has always been one where it was the clerk working with the responsive departments as well as the legal department. And so what we've done is we've always had interdepartmental collaboration, but what we've done is eliminate the little bit of checks and balance that we had. And if you ask people that actually FOIA, whether that's journalists or activists or others, they would say when it was under the sole autonomy of the clerk's office, we had way better response times, and people would get the records that they have a right to receive.
Great, thank you very much. All right, so we've reached the conclusion of this forum. So we'll end with closing statements, 90 seconds, beginning now with candidate Murray.
Okay, thank you. So I will say to you that there is clear differences between my experience and my candidacy as a Fifth Ward Aldermanic candidate. I believe that my work that I have done in the ward over 20 years, being part of at least 3 initiatives within the last 4 years, the Stop of the Overspending at Robert Crown, the Evanston Voter Initiative, as well as looking at Harley Clark as a community base for all residents to enjoy. That is just what I've done in the last 4 years. My work from the beginning, just walking into City Hall, complaining about no activities for youth, led to me being one of the founding members of Evanston Youth Initiative that led to the Youth and Young Adult Division as we know it right now. And all of the work that I have done as a host for the Fifth Ward meeting for over 10 years, which led to national night outs, several candlelight visuals, as well as 300 guns being removed from this city for the gun buybacks that I've held since 2012. Clearly, the work and the several years of advocating for issues throughout the community, being a go-to person to respond to the issues and the needs of the Fifth Ward community is who I am. That's how I'm identified. And for the things that we have very crucial situations that are coming up. And not only will I represent
Thank you. Thank you so much for that closing statement. Candidate Burns, your closing statement, 90 seconds, please.
Yes, thank you for this. I am excited at the opportunity to be a Fifth Ward, the next Fifth Ward Alderman. Happy to have the endorsement of both the current and former Alderman of the Fifth Ward. And was so excited that I decided I wanted to go out and knock on every single door in the ward. At this point, I'm 90% complete in knocking on every single door in the Fifth Ward. And in a week's time, I will have knocked on every single door in the ward. I've had at least well over 400 or 500 conversations with Fifth Ward residents. I'm fired up because I see tremendous opportunity in the ward. This is a community where many of my mentors and longtime friends were raised in a place where I affirmed my racial identity, not just as a Black man, but as a Black Evanstonian, which connected me to a really rich and old and important history in this town. And, I think in order to get things done, that's what people want more than ever when I go to the doors, we need somebody that has both the government, but in political and organizing experience, and to bring all those three things together to get things through the legislative process. And if you want somebody who is passionate about this work, that has a proven track record that you can see on burnsfor5.com, please vote for me on April 6th. Early vote starts March 22nd. Thank you for this opportunity, League of Women Voters and Evanston Public Library.
Thank you very much. Thank you, both candidates. I have to congratulate both of you. We got through all 13 questions. So that's a record, and a great range of information that you've shared with Evanston voters. Again, I'd like to acknowledge the participation of the Evanston Public Library in collaboration with the League of Women Voters. And as it doesn't hurt to remind people one more time, early voting starts March 22nd and Election Day is April 6th. Please participate and have a great afternoon. Thank you all very much. Good luck.
Good luck. Thank you.